It is currently Wednesday, April 4th, 2012, and this is Day 9 Daily number 439. Yes, I still have a fever, as evidenced by the fact that I have a tweet of me taking my temperature with this thermometer. And I'm at 100. I'm at an even 100 kilter. Not so much that I must be hospitalized. Not so little that I can't be a victim. Oh, poor me, I'm sick. But still, the esports industry isn't gonna make itself happen. We have to make it happen. Therefore, I am showing up. Unless I begin to get dizzy and pass out, I will be doing the Day 9 Daily PvP analysis of HuK's Dark Templar style tonight, followed by the After Hours Gaming League semifinals between Zynga and IBM. For any of you who don't know that, just check out this website, afterhoursgaming.tv. And, I will note that even though this show is StarCraft focused, and we consider ourselves StarCraft gamers, the overwhelming majority of anyone involved in the StarCraft community is a gamer at heart. So I asked people about their favorite old school games, and it's still flying up. When I say old school, I'm talking about like N64 and Dreamcast or earlier, like those really old school. And I'm seeing some great things like Streets of Rage. Oh my god, those games were so awesome. Classic beat 'em up. One of my favorites is Guardian Heroes on the Sega Saturn. Really loved that one. And what was another of my super old school? Okay, here's a really, really old school game, Syndicate Plus. Anyone play that? Bullfrog Studios, far and away one of my favorite all-time game studios. They made Theme Hospital, Syndicate Wars. Loved those games. Loved those games. Shadowcaster. Anyone play that game? I actually think the game is bad, but I played it so long. We got some Double Dragon. Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim. Do you remember that really ominous intro where it's almost like they tried to do something goofy and fun, and then it just became more surreal and dark and twisted? God, I'm gonna write that down somewhere. Notepad. Games to play. Earthworm Jim. Excellent. We have it written down now. I gotta start saving that so that way I don't forget to play through them. Ladies and gents, now that we have just briefly graced the surface of the games that you and I loved to play when we were young, let us hop into Protoss vs. Protoss. You know what sucks about Protoss vs. Protoss? Everything, right? Am I right? Come on, PvP sucks! I don't mean it's an uninteresting matchup. I don't mean that it's all about luck. I don't mean that the game is poorly designed or any of that total untrue garbage. What I mean is that Protoss vs. Protoss, probably more often than any other matchup that I've discussed with people, causes rage. It causes this feeling of, oh my god, what do I do here? If I do this, then he'll 4-gate, and if I defend against the 4-gate, then he expands, and if I try to expand too, then he goes blink. And it's this huge crisis, nightmarish mess. One of the reasons that PvP has this illusion to it, and I want to emphasize that that is an illusion. The reason it has this sort of illusion of being really, 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 really annoying is, in my opinion, two big things. One is the warp-in mechanic, the fact that I can arrive at your base really, really quickly. I guess three things. The second is blink, which is which can be sort of a terrain-defying ability. I mean, for instance, in Terran vs. Terran, let's say I have 2 siege tanks and you have 3. Well, if I'm sieged up, you have to kind of walk into my siege range, take a whole bunch of damage, and I, with my 2 siege tanks, will in all likelihood kill off your 3 siege tanks, if I'm positioned appropriately. As a result, my entrenched position is much better than yours. But if you have 12 blink stalkers, and I have 10 stalkers on high ground, you just blink up. Doesn't matter that I was on high ground and you couldn't get vision. You just straight up win the game. And of course, when blink stalkers end up in play, slow zealots are almost non-existent in the battlefield. And the third thing that makes the matchup pretty annoying is the Colossus. There are really not that many alternatives to the Colossus in terms of being a really huge damage-dealing ground unit. Again, to use Terran vs. Terran as an example, the Marine King Prime Mass Marine Marauder with Medivacs, just doing lots of counter-attacking, and ultra-mobile, that can serve as somewhat of a replacement for the might of tanks. But in a Colossus versus Colossus battle, everyone's seen the crazy stories of 8 colossus and not really a ground army versus a huge max army with 5 colossus. And the 8 colossus army wins with like 6 colossi left over. Like a huge significant margin. So this is what leads to this sort of unpredictability and this sort of seeming frustration. But what we want to do is we want to turn that into a useful series of directions. Because if we can take our frustrations and turn them in to phases of a game, then we can start answering the question of what is a build order that will work from start to finish. So cool, I've now done all sorts of wonderful, great motivation. I will now briefly state HuK's build order. The one that we're going to look at today. Huck opens up with a relatively fast Dark Templar. In some cases, really fast. In other cases, pretty damn fast. He's going to open with that. He's going to follow it up with an expansion and 2 more gateways, largely focusing on Zealots. He's going to be going Zealots with an Archon made from his DTs. Following this up, Huck is going to be going 2 Robo Facility Colossus for a huge amount of Colossus. So we've literally stated it. What I want to do is I want to hop into a game where we're going to watch it really, 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 really quickly and just blast through it so that way we can see the sort of 500-foot view. And we're going to talk a little bit about what makes this build order end up working so nicely. Whoa, volume, you might want to crank down a bit. So the first part, I'm not going to worry too much about the gateway counts for this first overview. I don't want our thought process of the build to be clouded too much, excuse me, with specifics on his gateway placement or his number of gateways. We do see a kind of early second gas. And what we're going to see is a really early Twilight Council. And a really fast Dark Shrine. At this point in time, I would like to note that our opponent, FX Oz, or FXO Oz, Oz is going to be just now finishing Stalkers 2 and 3. By the time this Dark Shrine is already begun, I want to just emphasize how ridiculously fast that Dark Shrine is, and gets a robotics facility. Pretty gosh darn ridiculously fast, and morphs in the 2 sentries. There are some exchanges at the front that we don't really want to focus on, but these DTs come, and literally Oz barely has enough time to get out an Observer. So I want to back up just to 650 right when the Dark Shrine finishes up. Here's the Observer. Boom, Observer pops out. And look at that. Look at how just barely that Observer got out. When did the robotics facility come down? Fast. I want to note that as we're still doing our 500-foot view, or 5-mile view, or whatever number distance. The big high-level view, damn it. Alright, excellent. We don't really do that much damage. We try to poke up, not too much avail. Huck goes for an expansion. Not a really fast expansion. I don't want you to worry too much about the exact timing of this. But an expansion does indeed come down. 2 more gateways do indeed come down. And we see Oz backing up with a Nexus expand of his own. Okay, in this period of time, Huck is making lots of Zealots. He's going to have 1 Archon that morphs in right up here, but lots and lots and lots of Zealots. And soon enough, he gets a robotics facility as he's building all his Happy Time probes. An Observer pops out. The 2 geysers are going to go down in a little while. Not too early on the gas geysers, otherwise he won't actually have enough money. And Huck gets his robo facility somewhere around here. Oh, there it is. Gets his robo facility. And these Colossi come out. Literally, we're just going through the what of the build order right now. What is going on? These 2 Colossus, yeah, there's some blink action going on. We have our Colossi popping out. We still don't have too many Archons. We do have Zealot legs. I don't want you to dwell too much on that. But we do kind of. I would actually describe this as a somewhat unusually timed Colossus push. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but it's somewhat unusually timed. Oz does have his 2 robo facilities out, has 3 Colossi. We have 3 Colossi as well. So we've now sort of looked at a what, and I will give you the satisfaction of seeing Huck clean this up relatively nicely with a big force of lots of zealots with speed, 3 archons, 2 sentries, excuse me, 3 colossus, 2 sentries, and an archon. Boom. GG. Okay. Now, I want to just stop and think about this build. The basic structure, DT into expand with a whole lot of zealots and 5 gates into kinda fast 2 robo production. Alright, what were these problems that we were talking about earlier on in Protoss versus Protoss? Oh gosh, he can be doing tons of different openings. He can be going fast Phoenix, he can be going for fast Twilight Council with Blink, he can be going for fast Robo, he can be going for hell, just big gateway attacks at the start, he can be going for a 2-gate expand style. Right off the bat, I want to just state bluntly what happens when we go Dark Templar. If we get a Dark Templar up relatively quickly, what does that force? Forces our opponent to have a Robo. Specifically, if our opponent just goes for really huge 4-gate Blink, we just win. If he goes for a 2-gate expand, we just win. If he goes for... damn it. Yeah. If he goes for a 4-gate, assuming we can hold it off, we win. Cool. This forces our opponent down a specific trajectory. At the end of the daily, I want to talk a little bit about the Blink Stalker with 3 Blink Stalker with Robo and 3 gates. That's a pretty common opening Blink Observer build. We're going to leave that to the end of the daily. For now, what I just want to note is that it forces our opponent down a Robo path, and very likely he's going to follow it up with some sort of Immortal or Colossus, but more often than not an expand and kind of defensive play. So cool, by us opening DT, we have now forced him down this path. We don't really need to worry about players who go Phoenix and then 3-gate all-ins. We don't need to worry about these 4-gate Blink all-ins. We don't need to worry about 3-gate pressure into expand. We don't need to worry about 2-gate pressure into expand. We're pretty much outright killing all of those. And again, just to emphasize the most important thing, the most important freaking thing, at 7 minutes, our DTs are about to warp in. More importantly, I should actually note that at around 5:30, we see, wow, that's actually even earlier than I thought. At 5:15, we start the Robo. A very, very, very early Robo from Oz with a very fast Observer that's chrono boosted. Even that barely gets out in time. I'm kind of belaboring this point, but before we go on to the next phase, I just want to finalize this beating of the dead horse by saying, this is an example of a broad idea in StarCraft 2, or actually in any strategy game. If I make a very powerful type of attack on some things, I will have to go on with the rest of the game. For instance, with here. In some circumstances, he'll have an Observer out, and I won't be able to do much damage. In all the other circumstances, I just kill him. I just freaking kill him outright. I mean, you might be saying something like, well, gosh, you know, well, Sean, what about something really weird? Like, what if he goes for 2 Stargate Void Rays? Well, you freaking go kill him, because you have Dark Templar. And this is true in a variety of even non-detection type things. I'm going to attack with Marine Hellion, and this should be defended by him if he does these 3 specific things, and all the rest of the time I win. So great. What we're going to do now, probably just before we end up going on to part 2, is we're going to look at the start of the game, and we're going to ask ourselves, how do we stay alive until we DT? Because there's a big number of circumstances that can be there. And this is where we need to think a lot about the possibilities of what our opponent could be doing and what certain signals from him mean. So we're going to lead up to the DT, and then we're going to stop. And also, we're going to do a different game later on in the daily where we look at a hyper-aggressive opening. So cool. First and foremost, we're going to go to the Huck cam. And let's just see exactly what he does. There's a few kind of interesting things that he does. You know, one is that he gets the 12 gate. He doesn't do anything like go for 13 gate. Just makes sure that he's even with the typical player. Actually, Did Oz just get his a little bit earlier? I actually will back this up to the 1 minute and 30-second mark. I'm pretty certain that Huck went for 12. Yeah, he did go for 12. I actually don't know how. Oz's was a full 7 seconds ahead, but whatever. Oz is the best player in the world. That's fine. So, okay, cool. We end up spending this chrono boost. We were getting an assimilator on 14. I'm stating a lot of what. Now I want to begin stating some whys. Do we want to be building a first zealot? And let me just note, very unusual to see a third chrono boost on that Nexus if you're really worried about early defense. Generally, players who are worried about the 4-gate will be saving chronos right here, but Huck having a lot of confidence here. Insta goes for the cybernetics core, and then is going to instantly go for this gas. In a lot of circumstances, going for this one zealot is going to be quite helpful. If you think about when the warp gate finishes, it'll generally be somewhere between 120 seconds to 160 seconds to finish. So what that means is you can generally build about 3 cybernetics core units out of your gateway. 2 if you're sort of doing the stutter step. But if you build that zealot, you're getting an extra unit total. So sure it would... what the hell am I talking about? Yeah, sure, a zealot is not going to be maybe as useful as a stalker in a lot of positions, but 4 units is going to be better than 3 for the purposes of holding stuff off. Why would Huck not build that on this specific map? Well, it's a big map. Big distances between. This is a cross-map only version of Antigua. This is the MLG version, so you'll see that there's no gold gas here. On a smaller map like an Entombed Valley that we'll be looking at next, we may very well want to do that, but still a fairly fast assimilator. And I'm going to keep an eye on this probe over here. Alright, we're putting 3 guys in gas. It's been quite common in Protoss vs. Protoss to do things like put 1 in gas and then rally this Nexus onto the geyser, so that way you kind of have 4 probes total in gas, and then 5, and then 6, and then you stop. Huck doesn't do any of that. Simple, straightforward. Did I say the gold gas? Wow. This base doesn't have gold minerals. Thank you for the catch, chat. But again, no real stuttering or any craziness on the gas. So we go ahead and get a stalker out. And it's at this point in time that Huck's looking for a number of key things. The chrono boost is always kind of an important thing, and a lot of people will know that higher chrono boost means that there's going to be a faster spend on the warp gate research, but specifically we're looking for 2 gas geysers and 1 or 2 gates. Second gate instantly means that there will be no zealot coming. You just don't have enough enough money to both build that first zealot and get this second gate down. And get this extra gas down. It's just sort of physically impossible. Unless you're Sase, and then you can kind of do whatever you want, but for our purposes, it's basically impossible. What our opponent is almost certain to be doing is some kind of 3-stalker opening. So let me just note that at this point in time, we will very likely not be up against a 4-gate rush. We very likely will not be up against that. What will we be up against in sort of a broad term? Some kind of fast-ish tech. Put it like that. Early aggression or not early aggression. We are in the not early aggression case. This has all signals pointing to that. So, as it turns out, Oz went for some kind of really weird build where he went for some kind of fast zealot. We don't care too much about that. You heard me say it's physically impossible to end up doing that unless you're Sase. Coming back to this point in time, this really, really early zealot. How early did he get that? Yeah, he actually chrono boosted before the gas. I believe. Am I lying? Am I totally full of shit? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he built the zealot before the cybernetics core. There we go. Woo! Yeah, it's physically impossible to have a normally timed cybernetics core and 2 gateways and this gas geyser. Whew! Whew! Phew! Managed to save myself there. That was an emergency. Alright, cool. Physically impossible for him, in other words, to be doing some kind of ultra crazy ultra early push with zealots and stalkers and all that good stuff. So let's come back to the Huck camp. So he pops in here, sees this composition of things going on, and knows that it's going to be hard for there to be a 4-gate. So, since there's fast tech coming, what Huck is going to do is he's going to see this and build the Twilight Council. Note that Huck actually could have built the Twilight Council earlier. I paused it right as it started. This is largely because Huck is trying to get a good read of what's going on in this base. And the is he teching or is he not, basically that's all that he needs. So there's this weird moment where the Zealot pops in. And oh no, we got our build spotted. Oz has seen the Twilight Council with that Zealot. What to do? Don't worry at all. It is not a big deal in the slightest. We don't care that much because it's not the surprise that we want. It's the forcing of him to go for a robo that we want. So at this point in time, Huck is going to generally be just doing a little quick loop around in this area and pushing pretty far forward. In conjunction with this, he sends a probe out. Now, if you are up against some sort of 4-gating aggressive player, between, I guess I would say 445 and 515, that's when that player is really going to be drilling towards you pretty hard to try to plant those proxy pylons at the base. So as Huck moves here, there's sort of this contingency plan that if he moves up a little ways and starts to see some sort of pressure, he target fires the probe. He's going to have to do some nice micro, but at the very least, he's not going to be up against a close-by warp-in because he sacked the stalker to kill the probe. Generally, you won't sack it. Generally, you'll just take huge damage. But of course, again, this is very hard for Oz to do because he has the 2 gateways going down. But okay, if he's not going for big aggression, I plant my stalker in the middle, again, to deny any sort of proxy probing, and I plant the proxy pylon. So we pretty much have a nice, clean, simple-looking opening. We're still building probes this whole time. We haven't really built any extra units because we haven't really had the need to. We scouted him kind of early, saw what was up. And then when our warp gate finishes, and by the way, notice how important it is that this pylon for 26 of 26 that finishes up, that is the one that we build as a proxy. That we don't build a pylon here to unsupply block ourselves and then build another one up here. And then, pretty simple situation. We warp in Zealots because we want to save up our gas. When we see that probe pop in, we target fire the probe with the Stalker as best we can. See that? Just target fires the probe. Pretty clean and simple. Do our best to kill off pylons. Warping in of these 3 Stalkers, you can warp in some Stalkers if you want. The important thing, though, is that our Dark Shrine is done. So we'll have plenty of time. If, for some reason, Oz was doing a huge aggressive warp gate thing, we would literally warp 1 DT in here, 1 or 2 here, and then we'd be in good shape. So excellent. We have now gotten to the mid-game. What we're going to do is we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue to examine what sorts of follow-ups we can do, and what sorts of information we're just going to have thanks to these very, very early Dark Templars. And then we're going to follow it up by opening up a completely different situation where Oz is actually going to be nutty aggressive, because I know many of you struggle with the nutty aggression Protosses. Ha! Come back soon! Come back soon.